Hello ladies and gentlemen, and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video, it is going to be the first episode in a brand new series on my channel called I Think I'm Falling For, where I am going to be covering movies that when I first watched them, I didn't love. Maybe I didn't even like them at all. But after a few rewatches and some years have passed, I have grown to love them despite their flaws. And for the very first episode of this brand new series, I am going to be covering Alien Covenant. So without further ado, let's hop right into things. So the first thing I'm going to get out of the way is everything that I loved about the movie from the very beginning. Because when I first saw it, I didn't hate it, I just didn't like it as much as I wanted to. Me, I am a massive defender of Prometheus. I love Prometheus. It is one of my favorite sci-fi movies of the past decade. So I went into Alien Covenant with very high hopes, and I was fairly let down. But that doesn't mean there weren't things I loved upon my first watch. The first thing that comes to mind is the visuals. This movie is extremely pretty. This is one of the most beautiful, stunning films I have ever watched. The visuals are top tier, like in the entire industry. They are gorgeous. And next is the score by Jed Kurzel, which also happens to be one of my favorite scores in recent memory. It's atmospheric, it's haunting, it's eerie, and it really sets the mood for each and every single scene. After that are what you all go to watch these movies for anyway, and those are the Neomorph and the Protomorph. The Neomorph is an earlier version before the Xenomorph. It's like white and pale and weird looking. It doesn't have like another jaw. It's really creepy and just slimy and unsettling to look at, but that's why I love it. These things are deadly. I mean, they tear these people to shreds. It is quite brutal what these things can do. And next is the Protomorph, which is the Xenomorph that most people thought we were getting in this movie, but no, it's actually a Protomorph, which I believe is the final stage before the Xenomorph. Though some people did dislike that it was full CGI, I thought that the CGI looked great, like everything else in the movie, so I thought it blended in really nicely. And next, before I get into the really big guns, I just want to say that I love that this movie went for the full R rating. Alien Covenant gets the R rating it deserves, and I thought it was awesome. I loved seeing that they really went for that disgusting and grotesque imagery because I felt it was very impactful and quite shocking. The last two big ones I want to cover are, of course, Michael Fassbender as both David and Walter, because let's face it, he's the only reason that these movies are still going. He is phenomenal as both of these characters. And I know especially when it comes to this movie, a lot of people are quick to just hate on these characters and their dynamic because of two things. One, the flute playing and the infamous "I'll do the fingering" line when David is teaching Walter how to play the flute, and the homoerotic kiss where David kisses Walter, which is just Michael Fassbender kissing himself. A lot of people didn't vibe with those moments, and honestly, I didn't mind them. I mean, I guess it was a little bit weird upon first watching, but again, after watching it numerous times, I really do sort of get the undertones they were going for here, and when you really think about it, these scenes are far more haunting and disturbing than they are, like, weird and sensual, if you know what I mean. I just love their overall dynamic, though. There is a very fine line there that I always love to see in this movie, and that's the fact that Walter is supposed to be the upgraded version of David, but by upgraded, he means that he's just more obedient to the humans. You see David progress from the beginning of Prometheus. David is much more monotone. He's less, I would say, less thoughtful and less mindful of himself and his surroundings. He was like a newborn in the beginning of Covenant, essentially, and as you see Prometheus progress, he begins to show more curiosity and more emotion, whereas Walter doesn't have that. Walter is the upgraded version. He doesn't go out on his own like a rogue AI like David does. By the end of Prometheus, and of course throughout Covenant, David is just completely on his own. He thinks and he acts for himself. Walter doesn't, and that is why I love the exchange about love and duty, where David says that, you know, he loved Elizabeth Shaw, and Walter says we're not really capable of that, and then David goes on and says, well, I know how you love Daniels, and David says, you know, you sacrificed your hand for her, what is that if not love? And Walter replies with duty, because that's all he knows is duty. He doesn't know that human emotion. That barrier has been upgraded and put there for him to be more obedient and a slave of sorts to the humans, which David is not. He believes that humans don't appreciate their own creation, that their own creation, being them, is superior to the humans. So that whole dynamic, I think, is excellent and masterfully crafted and often overlooked. And the last thing that I want to say I loved right away when I first watched this movie is the three main leads, being Catherine Waterston, Billy Crudup, and Danny McBride. I really do love Catherine Waterston as like the lead hero, the leading lady. Not only does she kick ass, but she's a very dynamic character that has a wide range of emotions. She goes through a lot of shit in this movie, and I think she just handles it so well. She's a great actress, and I think she was a perfect fit for this role. The same thing can be said about Danny McBride, though. He doesn't get as much screen time as I would have liked, but he was another character that I felt was very human and very down to earth, and that made me gravitate towards him a lot because I found he showed a lot of that raw emotion, which is something that you don't normally get from the funny man Danny McBride, so I thought that was really awesome to see him take on this role and absolutely nail it. And lastly is Billy Crudup now. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. The biggest thing I can say about him in this role, because I think he's also a great actor, but I love his dynamic in himself. He has that sort of torn mindset between faith and science. He's very much so a man of faith, and that's why he even says that they wouldn't trust him with the captaincy when the ship, the Covenant vessel, first took off, because he has that faith. And, you know, the Wayland organization, or whatever they're called, Wayland Corporation, they didn't trust him to be a captain because they thought his faith would bring him down. But as the movie progresses, he is posed with more things to support science and support faith. And, you know, it's really important, I think. It is a great sort of dynamic that he has in this character and that other characters see within him, that he sort of has these two sides between him, with believing in science but also believing in faith. And now for the things that I didn't quite love about this movie when I first saw it. And the biggest thing was, this is how I could summarize this movie, and it is the fact that it wasn't necessarily the Prometheus sequel I wanted, nor the Alien prequel. I found it was just kind of a filler movie. Like, I think when Ridley Scott was told that he would get to make more Alien movies, he had a trilogy in mind. The only thing is, he knew the beginning of the story with Prometheus, which again I think is a masterpiece, and then he had an ending, but he didn't really know what to put in the middle. Therefore, there was a lot of decisions in this movie, a lot of story decisions, a lot of character decisions, and then things I didn't agree with that, you know, come off of Prometheus and were supposed to lead into a third film. And I feel like this was very much so a filler movie that they didn't really know what they wanted to do with. Now, of course, there will be spoilers in this video as well. I should have said that earlier, but now you know going forward that there are spoilers for Alien Covenant if you didn't see it already. The next thing that I really didn't like is the fact that David killed off Elizabeth Shaw, because I thought Noomi Rapace was the best part, aside from Michael Fassbender as David, in the first Prometheus film, and I was very much so looking forward to seeing what she did in the sequel where Prometheus left off, and even more so than that, the fact that David completely wipes out all of the engineers, whatever they are. So he kills Elizabeth and then deploys all of the black goo, killing all of the engineers, so it essentially wiped out everything that it felt like Prometheus was building towards. So yeah, that kind of pissed me off. And the last thing that I really didn't like is that I felt this movie was almost pretentious in the beginning. Like, I felt it was really pretentious. It thought it was being a lot smarter than it really was. There's so many allegories about God and the afterlife and creation and divinity and things like that. And when I first saw this movie, I just felt like they were really cramming it down your throat, and it just felt sort of offbeat and pretentious, so I really didn't like a lot of that stuff either. But as of right now, with everything I just said, this movie is now almost 4 years old. I've probably rewatched it 5 or 6 times, and after the last rewatch, I feel like I've really sort of changed my tune on this movie. Hold on there for just a quick second. If you're enjoying the video, don't get stuck in that 90% who are currently watching and not subscribe to my channel. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button right now in order to find more content just like this. It would be a huge, huge help to me and my channel, and I would greatly appreciate it. And while you're at it, don't forget to ring that little bell icon, that way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And now, back to the video. And the first big thing is the allegories that I just mentioned. Where I first thought them to be pretentious, I now find that the allegories, quotes, references, further amplify the story's messages, tone, and central plot points. Lines like serve in heaven or reign in hell come from Paradise Lost, which, fun fact if you didn't know, was actually the original name for this movie. It was supposed to be called Alien Paradise Lost. They changed it to Covenant at the last minute. But Paradise Lost was written by John Milton, which was first published in 1667. The poem concerns the biblical story of the fall of man, the temptation of Adam and Eve by the fallen angel Satan, and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. Or when David says, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Whereas Walter enters and finishes, "Nothing beside remains, round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sands stretch far away, which comes from Ozymandias, which is the title of two related sonnets published in 1818, which is also the instance where David cites the wrong author and is then corrected by Walter. The last thing I'll get into for these allegories is a little tune that we hear not once but twice in this movie, and that is Richard Wagner's Das Rheingold Act 2, the entry of the gods into Valhalla. This can be interpreted in a number of ways, but I found this response online in some sort of movie forum that I've taken quite a liking to, and it goes as such. I would place emphasis on Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen, in combat honorably. In this context, David is entering the deck that has the frozen travelers, pilgrims if you will. In Valhalla, we get the imagery of Odin and the many worthy dead chosen by his Valkyries for training and fighting in the realm of the Aesir to prepare for Ragnarok. While Odin himself was a semi-subversive god who sometimes intentionally brought about human conflicts to increase his own ranks. David presumably takes this position to use these many worthy souls to concoct and perfect his conception of the human/xenomorph hybrid for waging his own Ragnarok on human and engineer kind. And that response comes from A. Bagel, so of course I did want to point out who gave this response, not my words. But it is the one that I feel like Ridley was likely most going for with this. And also those decisions to kill both Elizabeth and the engineers, I also feel adds to the bigger story as a whole, where David, essentially it's a mixture of Frankenstein's monster, but it's also more so David wants to be the last creator is how I see it. He wiped out the engineers, so that gets rid of his creators, and now his job is to wipe out his creators with the xenomorph, which he says is again the perfect organism. That's what he's trying to create, to wipe out humankind. And then who created the xenomorphs? Him. You see that also when he is interacting with the neomorph. He is in love with it. He doesn't want, the captain, Billy Crudup, to shoot it, and he freaks out and shows again that emotion that Walter doesn't have when the neomorph is gunned down. And of course he leads Billy Crudup into a trap where there's a face hugger and everything like that. So it really does come down to David has this sort of, god-like concept of himself. He wants to be the last remaining creator, and I feel like that's why they kill those characters. And again, although I didn't like it at first, knowing this is David's story arc and kind of diving further into these little details, that is what really kind of makes me more so agree and be on the side with these decisions. Because all in all, although it's supposed to be a Xenomorph sort of origin story trilogy, it's really not. This is David's story. Prometheus to Alien Covenant and Alien Covenant to if we ever get a third film. This is David's story. It just so happens to be a Xenomorph origin story subplot going on as well. The last thing that I like is I really do enjoy that opening scene. I never didn't enjoy that opening scene, but again, upon further rewatches, there's things in it that really stick with me. And that's the fact that I feel like David gets a lot more from his father or creator, Peter Weyland, than the story really lets on to. But David gets so much from his father, and by that I mean the fact that he's a narcissistic sociopath with a major god complex. After Peter Weyland spews on and on during the beautiful opening scene about how he doesn't believe humankind was just, a random act of biology, or by mere biological chance as he puts it, he tells David that the two of them will find his creators. To which David then responds, "Allow me then a moment to consider. You seek your creator. I am looking at mine. I will serve you, yet you are human. You will die. I will not." Implying that why should he serve under him if he is superior and cannot die? And again, of course, Peter Weyland doesn't really like that. He just snaps and says, "Bring me the tea, David, bring me the tea." So all in all, at the end of the day, I still don't love this movie. I would still put Aliens, Alien, and Prometheus above it. But when I first saw it, it was like a 5. I really disagreed with a lot of the story decisions, a lot of the character decisions, and I didn't like this movie anywhere near as much as I wanted to. But after numerous rewatches, I would say it's creeping up towards a 7, 7.5, maybe even an 8. A lot of these things that I didn't like at first, upon further rewatches and doing some research, which I know shouldn't be necessary to love a movie, I am really starting to love this movie. I know a lot of people think the same thing as me. It's not the Prometheus sequel they wanted, nor the Alien prequel. It focuses too much on David. It focuses not enough on the Xenomorph, so on and so forth. It's just not really the sequel a lot of people wanted, but taking into consideration everything that I have just said, I really do think you should go rewatch it with these things in mind, and I think you might enjoy it a little bit more. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my change of opinion on Alien Covenant. Do you think I'm just spewing a bunch of bullshit and pulling stuff out of my ass, or do you think that these are some valid points that really do warrant this film a rewatch? And please let me know down in the comments if you like this new series and if it's something I should continue. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe, thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.